We're here today in the White House. Thank you, President Biden, for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you for wanting to speak to me.
Of course. And yet, our agenda has been moving slower.
Here's Brian Tyler Cohen interviewing the President of the United States for his popular podcast and YouTube page. Recently, his YouTube hitting a milestone.
Well, two things.
And that's it. 2 million subscribers. Oh, my God. Okay.
2 million subscribers to his YouTube page. His individual videos often receiving millions of views each, among the highest engagement of any progressive online. Brian Tyler Cohen is here. Brian, welcome. Good to see you. By the way, you can stream new episodes of his podcast every week. We want to put up the information on the screen. It is called No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. So no lies today. You got to keep it 100.
All right, let's
Brian,
do it.
welcome back to the issue. It's good to see you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Let's talk about what you're really good at is this idea of messaging. Clearly, you found a way to connect with millions and millions of people in the digital space. And right now, Joe Biden's got a bit of a messaging problem. His polls show that his favorability is low. There are a lot of concerns about his age, people saying that we shouldn't have a president that's that old. What would your advice be in terms of the messaging for the Democratic Party to overcome some of what are clear weaknesses?
In terms of messaging, I think that initially people get so worried about Joe Biden's age, but this is binary. It's a choice between two people. And if we look at Joe Biden versus whoever the Republican candidate is, again, most likely Donald Trump, it becomes a much clearer race in terms of, not wanting to accept that extremism. And in terms of the messaging that you were alluding to before, I think it's pretty simple. It is that extremism. It's the extremism that Republicans have put forward in the form of abortion bans, LGBT bans, book bans, trying to slash earned benefits like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. They've put it on full display in 2018, even to a higher degree in 2020, to a higher degree than that in 2022, and they're changing nothing as we head into 2024.
But that's an argument against the other side. What's the argument for Joe Biden? Because don't you want to have a positive message?
Yeah, of course. I mean, if you look at what Joe Biden's been able to accomplish in just 2 years in office, it's the most accomplished presidency that we've seen in our lifetimes. I mean, we're looking at the PACT Act, the CHIPS Act, which has led to an explosion of jobs in this country, the American Rescue Plan, the first gun safety bill in 30 years. We have finally allowed the government to negotiate lower drug prices, record climate investments. We have 12.5 million jobs that have been added. The unemployment rate's at its lowest point in almost 50 years. I mean, that record speaks for itself.
So in terms of the Republican race, because it's getting more crowded now, this week we saw new people entering it, but it sort of starts with Donald Trump, who right now polls show is the leader. And obviously there are a lot of flaws with him electorally. But there's also this incredible strength that he has in terms of a connection with his base that seems unbreakable. The guy is a TV star. He's really good at debates. And he's good at putting his opponents in uncomfortable positions. Is there an argument that Donald Trump may be both the weakest and the strongest Republican nominee?
Absolutely. I think for the same reasons that he's strong is exactly why he's weak. It is that very, it's his boisterous nature, his whatever, all of that, everything that is Donald Trump that brings all of his supporters to him, which is that, 30% of the electorate that also pushes so many people away.
So in terms of other candidates, Ron DeSantis entering the race this week, his argument would be, I don't have the baggage and the indictments, but I helped you out during COVID. If you're a Republican, you think he did a great job in Florida during COVID. Obviously, Governor Newsom has a different approach here in California. What's the argument against Ron DeSantis?
You have Ron DeSantis, who thus far has refused to display any semblance of strength, right? He refuses to throw even a single punch against Trump. And so if you're trying to differentiate yourself from Trump, and yet you're too afraid to actually do it, then I don't see how you're making that case to any of the voters, that I'm going to be the guy that can defeat him, and yet at the same time, I'm too afraid to actually do anything to defeat him.
Another potential candidate hasn't gotten in yet, but probably going to get in soon, is Mike Pence, who we talked to recently, who's clearly got a close connection with the evangelical community, running on his religious conservatism. Does Mike Pence have a shot?
Are you asking if there is a lane for Mike Pence in the Hang Mike Pence party? Or should we throw to those insurrectionists in front of the White House and with a gallows with Mike Pence's face painted on it and see what they think about Mike Pence leading the Republican primary?
So you don't think he's got a shot?
I don't think that there is much of a lane for Mike Pence in a party that was very willing to see him assassinated. No.
Let's talk for a moment about you. Can you tell us a little bit about your backstory, how you got into this and how you built this?
Yeah. Well, I had initially moved to LA to act, and did that for a little bit, and didn't exactly seem fulfilling going in for Cars.com commercials and and hawking Cheetos or whatever other brands I was called in for. But was always interested in politics. Organized to bring my whole campus down to the polling places when I was in college for Obama in 2008, and started writing some articles for HuffPost, and eventually recognized that I wanted to do video content, and that kind of married the political, love for politics with my interest in being in front of the camera, and started a YouTube channel for nobody, really. I mean, 40 views, 50 views, 100, and just kept at it, kept doing it consistently, and did whatever I thought was right. Did what I kind of put on display, what I thought the message needed to be, and it kind of took off from there.
You have just a huge audience at this point, especially among black voters. You have an especially big audience. Why do you think people connect to what you're doing, and what are you doing differently than what everybody else is doing? Yeah,
so I come at this from a different perspective in the sense that I don't have a background in D.C. I've only been to D.C. 3 times, maybe. One was to interview the president in the White House. So, my background isn't in any of this stuff. And so when I think about this stuff, I think about it in the way that a normal person would, because we both don't have those backgrounds. Me and the rest of regular America don't have these backgrounds where it's just thought of in terms of political terms. So I think just taking a common sense, no bullshit approach to all of this stuff is kind of like what's been most interesting to people who watch it.
Yeah, and Brian and I are very close, and I remember when you started your podcast, and we sort of were talking about that over lunch, and then it ends up with you at the White House interviewing the president. What was that experience like, to be brought in as sort of an online guy and to be put face to face with the most powerful person on the planet? Yeah,
it was, I think it was the best day of my life. I mean, it was crazy to be there, and I didn't believe it was going to happen until the moment that he walked into the room. And I knew, my heart was pounding sitting there, because the leader of you're in the center of the universe when that happens. Right. And he walks in, and I was telling myself, I just have to get the first question out and not flub the first question, and then I'll settle into the interview. And able to get the first question out, and we just spoke from there. But one interesting thing was we had 15 minutes, and we had somebody behind him counting me down, and so I was constantly hyper aware of the person in the background counting me down. And Joe Biden has a tendency to be a little long-winded, and so I remember asking him my first question, and he went on a tangent, and I felt the minutes counting down in my head, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 minutes, and after his first answer was done, we were more than a third of the way through the interview, and I'm just reshuffling the questions in my mind. But how do you interrupt the president of the United States? You just got to, when he's done talking is when the answer's over. Yeah. And so that was the interesting part. But you learn little ways to move the conversation forward and whatnot. Other than Joe Biden, who is your favorite guest on the podcast? Well, I have a great time when Elex Michaelson comes on the podcast, because I'll tell you what, it's the one time where you don't get talking points. It is just a fun, normal, casual conversation. So that's my very diplomatic answer there. Oh, that's smart. I mean, that doesn't make sense to bring that. No, well, I think I'm your most frequent guest. Most frequent guest on the show. We have a great time, so people should check out the No Lie podcast for some of our past conversations. Yeah. And you can see me in a T-shirt. All right, well, you're now on our show, so we're going to do our personal issues game. This is where we put 30 seconds up on the clock, and we get to know you a little better, because cultural favorites is what you're all about. Okay, so let's start with this, if we can. Brian Tyler Cohen, what is your favorite movie of all time? Oh, Forrest Gump. Who is your favorite band or musician? I'd say Pretty Lights. Who is your favorite He's a DJ. Comedian? Favorite comedian? And I don't know if he falls into the comedian category, but I've been an Adam Sandler fan forever. So yeah, sure. Best way to relax? Oh man, I'll let you know. I'll let you know when I get there. Okay. Yeah. Watching a movie, right? Yeah, maybe watching a movie. We'll go with that. Yeah. All right. Well, you're proud Californian now, but where are you from originally? From New Jersey originally. New Jersey. So we're gonna play some music. I think New Jersey's greatest son, other than you.
Bruce.
Yep.
So we're taking you out with Thunder Road. Brian Tyler Cohen, everybody. No Lie Podcast.